Okay, so as you said, my name is Alex, and I am a junior Java developer at Brandwatch. I've been a developer now for about 8 months, and I thought I'd give a little talk about my experience in becoming a developer. I did time this a bit yesterday, and I went a bit overboard, so I'm going to talk really quickly. Let me know if if I'm just mumbling, because that's a very New York thing to do. Okay, so what is being a junior all about? This talk is about the good, the bad, and the ugly, but we're going to get the bad over with first and really hope that we have time to sort of finish off with the good. Otherwise, it's just going to end on a really sad note. The first thing I'm going to talk about is the more I learn, the less I think I know. And this is something that I sort of felt like, when I went into university, obviously I didn't know the first thing about computers. I didn't know the first thing about Java. I didn't know the first thing about programming. And really quickly, I sort of got this impression that as long as my code worked, as long as I was able to make it compile, then I was good enough and I was a programmer and I knew all there was to know. But really, as soon as I became a developer, or even a little bit before, I felt like the more I was actually working in the industry, the more I was actually working in Java, the less I actually knew. So I would, submit a PR, and then I'd see a bunch of comments mentioning software I'd never used, or some kind of Java thing I'd never heard of, or I'd read a book, and it's kind of like that Wikipedia experience where you start out researching like bow ties, and you end up in like 16th century beards or something, and because everything I'm reading, I'm like, oh god, I don't know what that is. I've never heard of that either, and oh my god, what's that? So it can very quickly sort of feel overwhelming. And it might feel like a bad thing, but it's actually kind of a good thing, because when you start out, you really kind of don't know anything, and you are aware that you don't know anything, but you can sort of get into this bad habit of feeling like you're an expert. Like when I first started out and I got my first program to run, I didn't really care that the code was crap. All I cared about was that I didn't get like that weird, block of red text, whatever that meant. It was all great, and I was a programmer. But as I went on, I started feeling like I didn't know anything, because I'm like, well, I thought that what I knew was good enough. What is all this stuff I'd never heard of? But that's because, I had never heard of it. And the more you're learning, the more you actually are, sort of, you actually are exposed to things that you didn't know even existed before. So, you sort of feel like, wow, there's a hell of a lot I need to know, but that actually means that you're actually, growing in expertise. So something that I've sort of suffered with, so to speak, is imposter syndrome, which I feel like I'm the queen of imposter syndrome. I've got it better than anybody else. Like, you guys don't even know. And I sort of feel like I have a right to have imposter syndrome, because I really am just that terrible. When I moved to this country 3.5 years ago, when I say I didn't know anything about computers, like, that's not me being cute. Like, I come from a family where my father thinks that the internet is the power adapter, so that when he plugs in the power, he's turning on the internet. And I'm not kidding. This is for real true. My mom does not know how to turn on a computer. So, coming from a family, I was not raised on computers. I was not raised in technology. I was a psychology major in college, and then I was working in the theater industry in New York, my hometown. And I knew nothing about computers. I could navigate Windows well enough to sort of like post Facebook updates. That's as much as I was able to do. And one day I'm sitting at my desk in my office, and I'm like, I really want to create artificial intelligence. And I decided that was going to be my new career. So I did like a free online course, and I read a book, and I was like, okay, so programming's the thing I need to learn. Let me go figure that out. And I, checked a few programs. I was like, okay, I'll move to England. I'll become a programmer. That can't be that hard, can it? So I moved here 3.5 years ago, and I took a university course. And the course was very, kind of theory-based. It wasn't very, hands-on, practical. So I left the course without actually having learned very much regarding actual programming. And then, I got a job, and then slowly through that job, I sort of finagled my way into becoming a developer 8 months ago. So obviously I felt like I did not belong there. I knew nothing. Like, these people who had years of experience, who had been brought up on programming, who had done computer science degrees, like, who was I to all of a sudden show up and be like, I know what I'm talking about? So the imposter syndrome is really, based on this idea that you're not actually a developer, you just fake it. I feel like everyone around me knows 1,000 times more than I do. So like, and that's not even, it's not even seniors, it's other juniors. I think other juniors start out and they quickly surpass me, and I'm never gonna get as good as them. This I really like. I've conned others into believing I have any skill or knowledge. I like this because imposter syndrome is based around this like sort of low confidence in your industry, like that you don't feel very secure in your job, and yet somehow you feel that you're like able to trick everybody around you, like all the seniors around. You've really been able to like pull the wool over their eyes. You're that good an actor that like you faked it so well. They all think that you're like something you're not. And also that you'll be found out eventually. So that's the idea that someone's gonna like run up to your desk and rip off your mustache and be like, he's not really a developer, and everyone's like, oh my God, and you get fired. So you kind of feel like that's gonna happen eventually. They're not taking my mustache, I'll tell you that much. So the other idea is that, you know, you'll never be as good as your colleagues. So it doesn't matter how hard you work, everybody's got their shit together. You don't know what you're doing, so you might as well just give up now. And this last one is really, this is what makes me feel like I've got this the best, is that I know that this is a syndrome. I know that all these are symptoms of it, and yet I'm like, yeah, okay, maybe you have the syndrome, but I really am shit. Like, excuse me, I'm a phony, I'm the real deal, thank you very much. So the fact is, you know, the symptoms are real, the syndrome's real, but the beliefs behind it generally aren't, unless, of course, you really are crap, in which case I can't really help you. So I've, you know, come up with a few tips for overcoming the anxiety that I've sort of felt going into an industry which I didn't think I belonged in. First of all, you know, going back to these symptoms, I would just be sort of curious to know if anybody here has ever felt any of these, if you're willing to raise your hand or not. Yeah, okay, so mostly everybody. And that's kind of, you know, sort of the main thing that, you know, sort of number one tip is to realize it's not just you, okay? Again, you're not that special that you think you're like, oh my God, I've been able to fake it, and nobody knows. Everybody feels like this. It's not just juniors, seniors feel like this too, and it's not just developers, because non-developers have this experience as well. You know, a lot of people in their industry just sort of feel they don't belong. So realize that you're not just the only one. Huh? I have blocked out your name. I did this for a really important, is my mic still on? Okay, I did this for an important reason, being that I didn't know if you wanted your name seen, but that is Matthew Franklin, in case anybody's interested, that I'm talking to. Don't worry, you're gonna come up many times in this talk. He's my boss. So anyway, revisit old notes. So another thing, I read a book, so therefore I'm the master on this. Juniors, like myself, need a lot of rules to begin with. You know, we're not experts. We need sort of hard and fast rules. When I learned how to program, I didn't know what a main method was. I didn't understand any of the keywords. I just knew I needed that, you know, order of words to make my program work. Same as when I became a developer. I didn't know much about Maven. Don't tell me about Maven. Just tell me what command I run. MVN clean install, fine. So I literally write down in a notepad or something the exact steps that I need to take, the exact commands that I need to. So I'll have, you know, somewhere on my computer I have something like cd git / repository name, git fetch all, and you know, literally the exact steps I needed to take, because these were completely new concepts to me. And it's nice to sort of go back and revisit these old notes, because I realized that over time I've been able to figure out what I'm doing. Things will break, so you sort of have to learn actually what the software does, what the code does. And it's nice to see, like, oh, I don't need these notes anymore. And it's proof that you are actually learning, even if you feel like you're not learning or you're not learning quickly enough. Ask for honest feedback and help. That's quite, you know, straightforward, but realize it is quite hard to ask for honest feedback. It's hard to get honest feedback, and it's also really hard to give honest feedback. So I'd say find somebody, a peer who you are comfortable with and you feel that they're comfortable enough with to talk about, you know, just really ask them, you know, how am I doing? Be honest with me. Where can I improve? I often use my team lead, Matthew, the greatest man in the entire world, who's sitting in the back. Everybody should just be amazed by how amazing he is all the time. You know, for honest feedback, and generally it's going to be a hell of a lot less scary than you think it is, but if you do get feedback in ways you can improve or certain things you can do, take that to heart. So this here, it says revisit old code you've written. It's actually unfortunately a bit smudgy, so you can't really read it, but this is a giant block of code that I wrote back in university when I was first learning Java, and this goes way off the page. Like, this is all that could fit on here. This is hundreds of lines. It's like just a giant block of if statements within a giant block of if-else statements. These lines go all the way over here. I think what I was trying to do was hard code every single possible move in checkers. And, you know, I thought it was really hot code. I'm like, I don't know what's going on with why my curly brackets like that. I don't know what R and C stand for. I don't know what's going on. But, you know, it's nice to look at this, because then today I can be like, wow, that's actually a really hot mess. And I probably wouldn't rewrite this. I'd probably write it from scratch. But it's nice to actually be able to see it. I have this in my public GitHub. If an employer wants to see my code, they're going to see this. So I have to remind people, be aware there's some old code in there. Practice in your spare time, that's pretty straightforward, Experts already made the same mistakes. This is really important to know because experts, seniors, can sort of feel like magicians to me. They just sort of know everything. I'm like, oh my God, something weird is happening with my program. And they're like, oh, are you doing this? Try this. And I'm like, how did you know? Chances are they've probably dealt with this in the past. They have a much bigger bag of experience. They're edge cases. They've done these things in the past, or they've seen it happen in the past before. So as juniors, my experience bag is very, very small. I only have a little bit of knowledge. I only have, the few things that I've come across. The important thing is to realize that, over time, that will increase. Experts generally aren't magicians. They just have a hell of a lot more experience than you. And prioritize, actually, going back to that last point, the thing that block there that I've, censored, this happened recently, and it's embarrassing to admit that because the thing that I didn't know was that system out print line called toString. I didn't know that. That's pretty basic stuff not to know. But the fact is, now I know that. I can put it in my bag, and I can move on with my life and just sort of, learn new things. So it's okay not to know things. You'll learn them eventually. And then prioritize. Like I said with the Wikipedia pages of never-ending things you need to learn, make sure that you sort of figure out what's the most important thing for you at that moment. There's plenty of years for me to learn Haskell and other, complicated things, to become an SQL expert. The thing that I chose to be most important to me right now in my current role was Spring and Java 8. So another thing that I sort of worry about is that I'm always going to be a junior. And the fact is, you kind of can always be a junior. It's being a developer or anything in any industry really, doesn't mean that just because I've done it for a few years, all of a sudden, therefore I'm intermediate, and then therefore I'm a senior. You can be a junior forever if you don't put in the work. When you start out, in university, again, all that really mattered to me was that my code actually compiled. I didn't care that it was, 4,000 lines of nonsense. All I cared is that it actually did what I wanted it to do. But it's not about making it work. It's about making it work well. That's our job. Our job isn't just to write code. We're supposed to be writing good code. When you come into the industry very early on, you realize getting your code to compile, that's a given. Like, that doesn't make you a programmer. Nobody's really, impressed by your syntax. So, it's kind of, the worry is that, oh God, I need to get really good at this. Otherwise, I'm just going to be in the same spot forever. And what is it that makes you more expert, that makes you more master? Well, if you are willing to try new things and constantly increase your knowledge, because, for example, I'll give an example that I have here with streams. I learned Java 7. I took a test in Java 7, and that's all I knew, and that's all I ever wanted to know. I didn't want to learn this Java 8 stuff. I was already new to programming, and all of a sudden now I had to learn a whole bunch of new syntax. And yeah, I wanted to kind of avoid streams. And just because they were, the new hot thing didn't mean that I had to use them. But what ended up happening was I would submit a PR, and I'd get 1,000 comments from Matthew saying that, I needed to turn it into streams. Or, even worse, I'd be reading somebody else's code, and I'd have no idea what I was looking at because they were using this. So very quickly, you can sort of fall behind, and you need to be able to keep up. So you might have seen this graph before. I see it in every presentation. It's like the 3-step graph into becoming an expert. And there's 3 phases, basically. There's the dropout phase, which is when you're just like, I don't want to do this anymore, I give up. I actually almost gave up on programming in uni. I was like, I'm going to finish my degree, I never want to look at this again. I hated Java. I hated it. I thought it was weird and wonky, and I didn't get it, and I hated it. And then I met Python, and things actually got pretty hot, and I was like, yeah, all right, I can deal with this. So I actually managed to get over the dropout phase and get into the next phase, which can actually be even more dangerous, which is this phase where you sort of, you were doing it. I was programming, but I didn't really want to leave my comfort zone. I had my little bag of experience, and I just wanted to keep pulling out the same things that were already in there. So for example, when I was learning Python, I was like, well, I get lists. I understand how lists work. Therefore, I'm going to use lists for every single thing. And I used lists for everything. I had lists of lists where the inner lists would be paired, that the first item was based on the second item. And I didn't care that my code was shit because I was like, well, I'm not going to learn something new because it's weird and scary. But eventually I was like, okay, I should probably learn what these dictionary things do. They sound pretty hot, so let me learn that. And with like the half hour that it took me to learn how dictionaries worked, my code was vastly improved. And more importantly, when I moved to Java, I already, when I had to deal with lists and maps, I already had that sort of understanding of the differences. So, it's really important to sort of force yourself outside of your own comfort. As you can see, amateurs kind of, if you're just always using the same things, you're never really that kind of plateaus really quickly. Experts, you can keep going up. So if you keep forcing yourself to learn new things, and this is true for every level of programming, seniors are always learning new things because, you can't sort of fall back down if you don't keep pushing yourself. So how do you keep pushing yourself? Ask questions when you don't understand. That's so basic, I'm not even getting into it. Go to a conference, get involved, get excited, do a talk. The most important thing is to actually be excited, be into the things that you like what you're doing. If you like it, if you're excited about it, if you're pumped about it, you're more likely to actually want to learn about it. So if you go to a talk and you hear about a new software that sounds really exciting, go home and play with it and work with it. It's worth, there's no time that's too soon to actually get involved in these things. Write a program that you think is too hard. It doesn't matter if you're able to complete it. Because if like right now, I'm thinking, okay, so I really want to write a web crawler, from scratch, or I really want to, write a program that can, I don't know, some kind of AI thing maybe, that I would think would be too hard for me at my current, level. But the knowledge I'm going to gain working through it is actually going to be very beneficial. Don't stop when you think you're good enough. Again, quite straightforward. Have a mentor. So as I said earlier, find people who you're comfortable with. There are people that I've, met who I realize are better able at teaching me than others. And that's not a reflection on other people's ability to teach. It's just I know who's able to explain things to me to a level that I understand. And, I use my one-to-ones with my line manager often to sort of pitch things that I don't quite understand, or to sort of ask questions about different things and learn new things. So legacy code, I'm just going to go over this very quickly. I didn't really know what it was when I started, as a programmer, but I just heard that nobody really liked it. And coding is already hard for junior. I can't stress that enough, at least for me. I'll speak for myself. It is really hard to become a programmer. And then, you have this massive code base, and all of a sudden now you're dealing with code that nobody really understands. The person who wrote it left 10 years ago. It's very hard to read, it's very outdated, and it feels like an impossible task. And you couple that with imposter syndrome, and it's like, oh, well, I'm supposed to fix this, or I'm supposed to make this better, but a real programmer wrote this. Who am I to actually think that I can make it any better? Although, I would love to, does anybody here like working with legacy code? Crickets. Well, there was a bit of this, so that's kind of, but I'm embarrassed to admit it, maybe. Nobody really likes it. Again, it's sort of like one of those, communal factors. We don't love working with it. It's hard for everybody. It reminds you that code isn't perfect forever. The greatest programmer in the world might have written that code. It might have been the greatest code ever written at that time, and we might look at it cheekily and be like, it's using Java util date. Where's the Jota time? Where's the Java 8? But maybe that was, not available at the time. And it's okay, because you realize that, everything is sort of a learning process. Everything needs to get better. Refactoring legacy code, I've noticed, has been an excellent way to boost self-esteem. If you make a little improvement to something, you're like, wow, I actually was able to make something a little bit better, work a little bit faster, or be a little bit more up to date. I love it when people more senior than me, which is almost everybody, comes up to me and says something like, oh, you worked with this, do you know how, so can you explain how this works? Because as a junior, it's like, wow, I can actually talk to a senior about something that they don't know, which is a huge, confidence boost. And then all of a sudden you become that app expert, which may or may not be a good thing, depending on, what it is. But it's actually quite nice. What I've used legacy code for the most was learning how to debug very efficiently. Because when I moved here, I didn't really know how to debug with an IDE. I was kind of like, I'll just sort of step through. But when nobody actually knows what's going on in the code, or maybe you cannot rely on the names of the methods, you really, really have to sort of step through every single piece of that code to know what's going on. And I use that as a tool to, help me out. So, legacy code's not the only hard thing about being a developer. Pretty much everything is when you're starting out. Pair programming, pair programming is like as if I'd started this talk by saying, let's all get into pairs of 3 and do an icebreaker. Like, how many people have been like, no, fuck that, I'm not doing that, I'm out. You know, or it's like telling a really shy person to go to a party and introduce themselves to a bunch of people they don't know. Like, already I'm feeling, with my imposter syndrome, a bit insecure about my abilities as a programmer. And now you want me to sit with somebody who knows what they're doing, who's more advanced than me, and they're gonna watch me. It's like I don't remember how to write a method signature. I don't remember what an integer is all of a sudden. I need to look up the syntax for a switch statement, but I don't want them to know, and it can be very, very terrifying. Also, what you should know versus what you do know. You know, a lot of people, they'll start talking to you and they'll be throwing jargon at you, and you're like, well, they are saying these words at me, so I feel like I should know what these are because they're saying them. But, like, you know, you could be doing that to them too. So what I say is either ask if you feel comfortable or just smile and nod. You know, it's okay to smile and nod. I'll see PRs come in from more advanced, you know, developers who will have like 4,000 lines of code, a complete refactor, complete rebuild, a completely new module, and they'll get a thumbs up. And I submit like a one-word change, like a typo fix, and I get 4,000 comments on why it's no good. And it can be really disconcerting, obviously, but I also feel like it's kind of your rite of passage as a junior developer. And I've actually set a personal goal for myself as a junior that I want to make a significant, so several hundred to several thousand line code change that gets less than 10 comments. We'll see how that goes. It hasn't happened yet. So I thought when I started out that I was the only one who used Google. I thought that I was cheating if I went to Stack Overflow. I thought it was actually, it was like a cheat. And I didn't want people to know because I was like, oh God, they're gonna like call me out for having used like the internet for learning how to do something. And then I guess I asked a few people and they're like, yeah, no, that never changed. You're gonna be doing that for the rest of your career. Like that's never, you're just gonna start Googling more advanced things, but it's okay because that kind of is your job. I'll spend entire days without writing any Java. I am a Java developer, and I'd say for any given ticket that I work on, about 20, at most, % of it is actually writing Java. I spend most of the time investigating, exploring, and then I'll do the little bit of implementation, then I have to fix my dev server, I have to build, I have to deploy, I have to redeploy, I have to test it, then I have to make a little tweak, and then again I have to go through all of that again. So there's very little actual Java writing in my job at the moment. Unit tests were a horrible thing to realize that they existed because they kind of went over it in uni, but not really, and all of a sudden it's like this huge deal. Like, I'm like, excuse me, you know, I made this work, why do I have to prove it to you? You know, it was really horrible to realize that I needed to write these tests, and you know, especially that like they were extremely important. But let me tell you, you'll be really freaking happy that those tests exist when things start going badly. Real code bases are big. Yeah, again, in university, they don't really tell you, by the way, you're gonna be working with thousands and thousands of classes one day. Because I write a program that has 5 classes, and I think I've written Skynet. I'm like, this is super complex. Like, you know, I'm hackers with a Z. Like, wow, you guys. And then I came to Brandwatch, and I'm like, okay, well, I don't even know where to begin, because there's about 4,000 repositories, and all of them have thousands of classes, and I don't know where to begin. And then 1,000 ways to tackle any one problem, you know, that's both a good thing and a bad thing. But starting out, it can be quite scary because, yes, there are mostly there are solutions to problems. The thing is, like, what's the best implementation to get to that solution? Because there's so many different ways to actually get to any given solution. So I'm really glad we had time for this, you know, slide, because I just want to point out that after all that, you know, doom and gloom, there is some good things about being a developer. This is an anonymous person. I love this because, you know, I really don't like people. Like, I'm gonna say it straight up. Like, I don't like working with people that much. I really like my computer. I do like people. But, you know, this is how a developer bugs you. This happened today. I got about 400 lines of Slack bugs because the person who sits right next to me wasn't actually going to tap me on the shoulder and tell me, because they know that that's actually more annoying than getting 4,000 bugs. Although I would totally do that to him. So why it's all worth it? I read the developer survey from last year from Stack Overflow, and I read that 48% of respondents never received a degree in computer science. 48%, that's almost half the people. And that's been my excuse for 3 years why I'm no good at coding, is because I never got a degree. So all of a sudden, there goes my excuse out the window, because I'm like, oh, well, so did like nobody else. 33% never even got never did a single computer science university course. So that's extremely interesting, but it's also really good to know because it shows you don't need to have a fancy degree and you don't need to spend a lot of money. And because I don't have a computer science degree doesn't mean that I will never be a good developer. My favorite thing about programming is that it combines the strictness of a hard science with the creativity of an art. I really like having solutions. Most problems in programming do have a solution, like maths. However, unlike maths, which has maybe 1 or 2 ways to get to that solution, there are thousands of ways that you can get to a solution in programming. That's what really differentiates one developer from another, because we're not really typers, we're thinkers. You know, how I, tackle the problem versus how someone else tackles the problem, that is really what, makes somebody a good developer. And getting better doesn't mean that you're able to fix more problems. It means that you're able to fix maybe the same problem a lot better. You're in demand and you're not going to be replaced by robots yet. I hope to create the robots that will replace us. That's my dream. But that's not going to happen yet. Don't worry about it. You can make some pretty sweet dosh. I mean, that's got to be up there because it's true. As I said, I don't like clients. I really don't. I worked on support. Come on, give me a break. You don't really ever have to talk to them. I had my the first thing I did when I became a developer is I was like, throw the phone out. I'm never using it again. People in general won't bother you. Again, you get thousands of bugs instead of people coming up to you and being like, so I need to talk to you. That may be a case-by-case basis, but at least, overall, I get to work with my computer more than I get to work with other people. As a developer, as an introvert, I really like that. So that's a plus for me. It might be a negative for you. And then the I am God moments, because after, 10,000 hours of just pulling my hair out and being like, I hate this. I think I said I hate programming like 10 or 15 times today. My manager's nodding. Yeah, like I really was just like, I hate this. I submitted a fix and then it, something broke on one of our testing development environments, and I was like, I hate this. I don't want to do this. This is the worst thing ever. I'm never gonna get it. Oh my God. And you're up till 3 a.m. And I remember when I was trying to make checkers work or something in uni, and just nothing was making any sense. I was pulling my hair out, and then eventually it actually worked. And I was like, okay, I'm God. Like, I am Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, because I've just made this work. And like, basically, I'm the greatest person in the world. And those are the moments we really live for, sort of feeling like we've created something, we've made something better. And despite all the heartache and difficulty, it's actually one of the best jobs in the world. And I don't regret it for a single day. So thank you so much for listening to me. I'm sorry if I've gone over, and please let me know if you have any questions.